Hello everybody, welcome back to the Youth Ledger. It's your host, Shiven Diwakar, and I'm so excited to talk to you about today's guest, who is Tricia Medrano Bridges. She is a non-profit leader who has helped raise over 6 million through Chiapas International, a non-profit to support women across Latin America and supply them with microloans. She's worked with the Grameen Foundation, earned praise from Nobel Laureate Muhammad Yunus himself, and brings decades of grassroots and global impact experience. Let's get right into the conversation, and I hope you enjoy. Hello?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, glad to hear that.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. Uh, yeah, it's great to talk to
You're
you.
very welcome. Yeah, thank you.
So, let's just dive right in then. So opening question, just general, how did you get into nonprofits? Like, what drew you into this space, if that makes sense?
Of course it does. It's an easy answer. When I was a little girl, I was blessed to have a mother that was that mother that everybody kind of hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
She was a member of the PTA. She was a member of all the little girls groups like Campfire Girls and Bluebirds and volunteering for all kind of things. She just dedicated her time to being involved in the community. And so as I grew up, I was trying to think about what I wanted to do. And I really thought about being a social worker because that was something that I felt like fit me, helping people in need. But then it kind of hit me that what my mom did is what I really wanted to do. But at the time, I was a mom with three little boys, and I also needed to have an income. So
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't just be a volunteer. So I lucked into a position that was my first one in nonprofit. When a friend of mine was leaving the American Diabetes Association, she came and asked me would I consider going to interview to take her job. And I said, yeah, that would do that. And my mom actually was a diabetic. So the mission was important to me. And I did that, and that was the beginning. So I had no real intent to go into it, but that's what I did, and started at the bottom and learned my way up. And after a couple of years at American Diabetes, I became the CEO,
Mm-hmm.
and I just stayed in that field for the rest of my life, and I was real pleased with it.
Okay, that sounds amazing. A lot of moms, I think, are role models for all of us, especially throughout our lives. So that's a big
Oh,
thing.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are fortunate now, and for a number of years, probably a good 20 years, there are a number of courses that you can major in at the university in nonprofit management. In fact, I
Mm-hmm.
used to be a guest teacher for a few classes at a university here on fundraising and donor management. But back in the time when I was entering in uh, as a young 24-year-old, there was not a university offering any curriculum like that. So it literally was a job. You had to go in, learn the organization, learn the process from
Mm-hmm.
the bottom up. So while I'm thrilled that people now have that opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to major in that and really make that a career, I also feel like I was pretty blessed that I was able
Mm-hmm.
to start at the bottom and learn every step of it all the way up. So that's kind of where it is now. It's certainly a career option now.
Mm-hmm. How did you go from that there to Chiapas International? Where's the connection? Or how did that all
Well,
happen?
I
Just wondering. Uh
Okay.
huh.
Well, the first 15 years of my nonprofit career were all in health related things,
Uh
such
huh.
as my first one, which was American Diabetes. I later became state director in Louisiana for the Leukemia Society,
Mm-hmm.
also worked for them here in Dallas. So I stayed in that field for quite some time and began to go into things that were not health related. uh, doing nonprofits that were about to build a new building and they needed a capital campaign or something. And I was working with securing dollars from the corporate field. But eventually, I made it to about 1996. I made it to the YMCA of Metropolitan Dallas. And the YMCA basically has forever been a group that also had missions. It wasn't just about fitness, although that's a big thing here. But if you look at the history of the Y, they began in England actually, and many of the YMCA's around the world are more related to needs of the community. Some of them even have an orphanage. Some of them are hostels, in areas where people need a place to stay. So in that time that I was there, we began working along the border of Mexico. There were so many children coming up through Chiapas, actually, and into Mexico, into Texas, to get to places in the United States where they had a parent or a relative. But of course, what was missing, that these children came with a name and maybe a location, and they didn't know anything else. And just thinking naively that when they got to the U.S., they could say, I'm looking for so-and-so, and they would find them. So a lot of these children ended up on the border of Mexico, all up and down the Texas-Mexican border. And if you did not get a hold of those kids quickly, the girls would be taken into prostitution often, and the boys into selling drugs. So the YMCA in Dallas partnered with the YMCAs along the border from Mexico to open what we called safe houses, which they do here in the U.S. now too. So that was my first introduction really into working with Latin America. It was later, I was at a university working and received a call from a headhunter who was looking for someone who had a number of years of fundraising and nonprofit management, but also had some connection with Mexico. And I just happened to be the lucky one that got the call. So I was able to interview and was given that opportunity to come in and lead the Chiapas organization.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I think all the experience kind of worked out. Well, it seems to me hearing the story. So, at Chiapas, what was day-to-day work like?
Well, let's go back just for a second, if you don't mind. Before they became a 501c, I believe it was around 2003, the founding the founding CEO of Grameen Foundation in Washington, D.C., a man named Alex Counts, came to Dallas and hosted a reception at a friend's home to introduce this concept of microfinance to some Dallas business women. And in that, he was looking for a group of women to take the challenge to raise, I believe at that time they were trying to raise about 840,000 or something to fund a group that was in Chiapas, Mexico. As it would be, Dallas businesswoman Lucy Billingsley actually came to that reception and was introduced to Alex, and he told her about these women who all they need is a little help. They need a hand up. They don't want a handout. They want a hand up to start a business, and felt that business women here in the U.S. would understand that because someone gave them a hand up at some point. And Lucy was really taken by that idea, so she agreed and gathered a number of Dallas women, and they did events for about a year, maybe 18 months. They did luncheons, they hosted, some ladies did events in their homes, like a tea or something. They did different things. Lucy wrote to a lot of her vendors, and they raised that money. And they were thinking that that was it. So, we're done. We met that goal that they asked for. But there was so much demand from the people involved that it continued, that they went ahead and got their 501c and became a Texas nonprofit. So that's when I got the call. At that point, I'd been in nonprofit for many years, and I was introduced to the committee and the group, And we had, right before they hired me, they took on a challenge of raising 3.3 million. And that was going to be a lot of money, but it was going, yeah, I heard you
Yeah.
gasp a little bit. I
Oof.
did too. I did too. So that was going to be the money that it would take to help a number of organizations. It would not just be Chiapas, Mexico, but it would
Uh-huh.
expand several places in Mexico, Bolivia, Dominican Republic. So there were a number of places that they would be providing funding for the Grameen Foundation to give loans to women to start businesses. So our daily look, if you would,
Hmm.
in the beginning, I was a one person show, and it was a little adjustment. I came from a nonprofit where I had 15 staff that were helping do things. And so it was a little bit of an adjustment, but Miss Billingsley's staff took me in, and somebody would help me when I needed help on the fixing my computer when it didn't work or whatever. And we had a great group of volunteer women. And unlike a lot of nonprofits I had been involved in, the board of directors at Chiapas and the volunteers actually rolled up their sleeves and worked. So there was always someone there willing to help. So our job was on a daily basis get out, meet people, tell the story about what we were doing in Chiapas, how we were changing lives with the women by giving them small loans. These loans were in our era back then, they were about $50 US money,
Hmm.
which when you're in a developing country, that $50 goes a really long way.
Mm.
And so that was pretty much our daily was giving speeches, telling people what Chiapas was, where we were working. When we began, most people here in the Dallas area had no idea where Chiapas was. They would ask me. So we always carried a map to
Hmm.
show them where it is. And it's very, very um, at the very tip of Mexico before you go into Guatemala is where it's located. And
Okay.
at the time, and I believe still, it was then, and I believe still, is the poorest state in Mexico.
Uh-huh. Okay. That is wow. Lot as you said, $50, I could imagine. I've visited a good amount of countries, and there's a lot of places where we just take out dollars and the reaction from locals. I can just see it on their face. So I think
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
fortunate enough to have the funds to be able to help a lot of people worldwide.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and just to give you an example, people used to ask me, well, what kind of business could you start with $50? Well, one of the things that the women in Chiapas, especially up in the mountains, they were very, very good at embroidery.
Mm-hmm.
These were descendants of the original Maya people that lived in those mountains. So they had passed down their art and their handcraft, such as embroidery, which even their daily wear were quite beautiful. So they could buy a lot of thread, a lot of yarn for that $50 and make things and then go down to San Cristobal de las Casas, which is the city we worked out of,
Mm-hmm.
and could sell them to the tourists. So that would be one thing. But when you were up in the mountain, sometimes you'd be an hour or more away from anywhere that you could get supplies. And a lot of people didn't have transportation. So you
Mm-hmm.
would see a lot of women add a little spot in their house where they could open up a window and that would be their store. And they would always have things like Coca-Cola. I don't know why I'm not trying to be a commercial for Coca-Cola, but but Coca-Cola and Frito-Lay products were in every store we found, um, and little snacks for the kids, and usually eggs that they had hatched, from their
Mm-hmm.
chickens. And so this kind of helped the people on the mountain be able to survive without having to go to a
Yeah,
city
yeah.
that was maybe 45 minutes away. So those are the type of things that they would use their money for.
That makes sense. Was there any client or community that really you remember very well? Someone who like had a story that Chiapas really represented, or
Absolutely. And I'm so sorry that this is a talk, and maybe I'll have to mail you a photo. There was a place that I was blessed to go, because I would go every year to Chiapas,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes several times. There was a place up the mountain about an hour and a half above San Cristobal de las Casas. And I was able to visit the same family 3 years in a row. Our goal was that we gave a loan to these women. You would start a business, and immediately, with the funds you could sell your products for, you could feed your children a little bit better. You had a bit
Mm-hmm.
more money that they could buy extra food. We also hoped that as these women developed more confidence, that the husbands, the men, would look at them as a businesswoman, not
Mm-hmm.
just their wife, who's supposed to be taking care of the kids and the property. So the first year I went, I met a lady, and her name was, I believe it was Hilda, and she was using her money to do embroidery. She was making pretty things with the embroidery, taking them down and selling them in San Cristobal. And in the house that day, we sat and interviewed her, and she had one of her daughters with her, and the daughter was learning how to embroidery.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, well, someday we hope that we can bring our father back home. And of course, we asked her, well, where's your father? Well, there's just not much for the men to do here in the mountains. And we have some land, but it's not level, and it's very hard to have cattle on it. And so my husband took a job in the States so that he could have money to send back home to us. And we miss him. We need him home.
Mm-hmm.
And I thanked him for the interview. And then I came back the second year. And the second year, go back to see Hilda again. And she says, oh, we have something we want to show you. And the people who took me up there from the local microfinance group had a pickup truck. So
Mm-hmm.
we all climbed in the back of the pickup truck, and we drove to this little spot. And literally, I'm telling you the truth, there was no way to walk down the slope. You had
Mm-hmm.
to sit down and slide down the hill. And we got down to this area, and the mother and the daughter said, this is where we want to grow flowers, because flowers are being grown all through the mountains, and we could get my father home to help sell flowers and help grow the flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, it was just a bunch of dirt, with straw and things on it. And I said, well, I certainly hope that comes true. Well, the next year, my third year, and the final time I was able to go back to visit them, I go back and they did the same thing again. Tricia, we have to go show you something. So we all climbed in the back of a pickup truck again, and we drove to that part of the mountain. We had to sit down and slide down again. But when we got to the base where they wanted to show me, the hillside was covered in gorgeous flowers. And there was this man who had a smile from ear to ear, who was so proud, and it was her
Mm-hmm.
father. They had brought him home, and they were successfully growing flowers and selling them down in San Cristobal. So there were millions of stories, but I think that one was the most visual
Mm-hmm.
that I can remember, because 3 years in a row we heard a dream, and each year, it came a little closer, and then I was able to go and see the finale and see that now a family was reunited. They had a business. The father was able to
Mm-hmm.
help provide, and it was the way that we wanted our project to go. So that would be my favorite.
That is just awesome. I'm imagining right now just a hill with flowers covered and the man standing in the middle with a smile. That is, yeah.
I, I will send you a photo, because it really was. It was
Mm-hmm.
something we were so proud of, and it was something we used to show others when we went into Dominican Republic and other places. Colombia, we went into Colombia. So it was an example that we used to demonstrate what microfinance could do, when you really are doing it the correct way. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for all of your efforts, you have received awards from the Grameen Foundation, I believe, and even a commendation from Nobel Laureate Muhammad Yunus. What did all these recognitions mean to you personally?
Oh, goodness. Well, of course, immediately I wanted to say, oh, I don't deserve this. I just was, I was a little bit overwhelmed. Um, I believe that, they were looking at not just the time I had been at Chiapas, but going back to the very early days of when I was working, my very first job. My goal had always been to help people that were struggling, whether they were struggling with health, whether they were struggling because of poverty, regardless what the reason was. All of the things that I involved myself in really came to that end. Somehow we have to make life better for you. And so once I understood that they wanted to say thank you, if you would, for dedicating my time to a cause and focusing on it for so long, then I was just very proud. I was very grateful. I had been blessed to meet Dr. Yunus on several occasions. He also was really happy with us because, believe it or not, even though it's in Bangladesh where he started, we were the only organization, the only volunteer organization that was doing what we were doing to support Grameen Foundation. Now, there may be others at the time, later, but at that time, we were unique. And so Dr. Yunus always made sure that he, stayed and visited when he came to things. And I was invited to D.C. to a luncheon with 12 people where he would address what he was doing. So I was blessed to have a lot of close encounters with him. And so it just meant a lot. It was a nice thank you. I think there's 1,000 people who could have been given that. And I said that day when I went to D.C. to accept it, that I accept it on behalf of all of the people that were involved in the Chiapas organization, because it truly was an amazing group of people. But of course, very honored, very honored.
Yes, that is certainly an honor. And my final question is, what do you have in plan now? Is it something with writing, coaching, travel? What do you plan for the future, or if you have any that you would like to share?
Well, I after retiring, I planned on consulting, for nonprofits, and then COVID decided it had something else to do because you couldn't go call on people, and so I began during that time coaching. I'd been coaching a young man who had started a nonprofit. And I continued coaching him and helping him write letters and writing proposals and just doing it pro bono. And I found that there were so many grassroots groups that had started that they had a mission of something very close to them, but they didn't really know what to do once they established it. So I helped a group south of Dallas start a food bank, if you would, and help them get their nonprofit. Then there was a woman whose son was murdered on his birthday. Unfortunately, he was 19 years old, and she started a group to support mothers of murdered children. And it's all from the heart, helping people, and she's doing quite well. I continue to work with several groups that are working for the rights of people that are imprisoned. Such as, here in Texas, our jails and prisons are not air conditioned, which people would say, well, that's a luxury, but not when it's 113 here. That is not even safe for human life. But we focus mostly on the two groups I'm involved in here in the Dallas area on reentry. That when people come home, we all want them to come home and have a second chance and not reoffend. But if you don't do something, if you don't give them the tools they need to know how to start fresh, then they're probably going to reoffend. And So I'm really interested in that. I work with two different groups in that way. And then I also work with a group in Kansas City that's reclaiming soil that's been damaged from waste from factories and things. So I have a pretty wide interest group, but mostly it's all gets down to what can I teach people
Mm-hmm.
coming up that somebody helped me with. So I guess I'm going to end it with just like we wanted to give a hand up to the women in Chiapas, I want to give a hand up to the people that are doing nonprofit work and just need a little bit of advice or help from someone who's at the other end of that career. And so I do that. I
Mm-hmm.
travel. I write. So those are, other than that, hanging out with my family. So that's enough to keep me busy.
Yeah, you are an inspiration, to be completely honest.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
Everything you've done, you've talked about, and you continue to do sounds absolutely amazing. And I think nowadays a lot of people forget about the impact you can make, as even with nonprofits. And I think it's a good idea to remind people of that. So, you're a prime
Oh,
example.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course,
And
of course.
I agree. People really would not understand how much nonprofits do. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, in the countries where we work, they were called NGOs, non-governmental organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very important that countries continue to have those. And sometimes it's just basic, making sure they have food. Sometimes it's providing safety. So whatever it is they're doing, it's things that humanity need, and there's no price tag for that. So
Mm-hmm.
I encourage anyone who ever listens to this or people you talk to, even if you do take a career where you're excelling and becoming, highly successful, still give time back to helping in your communities because that's really the circle that we have to do. So,
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Well, it was amazing talking to you. Thank you so much.
well, thank you so much. And I look forward to perhaps seeing you in the future and hearing more about what you're doing. So, thank you very, very much for giving me an opportunity to share. I appreciate it.
Of course. Alright,
Okay.
I will see
Take
you
care.
around then. Have a good one.
Yes, sir. You too. Bye bye.
Bye.